All right, thanks for joining us, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the Clean Water Act. So this is our Water Wednesday series. We normally have one webinar per month. We talk about a lot of different topics relating to our work and the rivers that we work on, the Potomac and Shenandoah. So if you're interested in learning about any other topics that we work on, they should be on our website and on our YouTube page. But like I said, today we're going to be talking about the Clean Water Act. My name is Emily Silence. I'm the Development Associate at Potomac Riverkeeper Network. A little bit of housekeeping before we go ahead and get started. Before we go ahead and get started, everyone is on mute right now. Just the easier way to go about things. Please type your questions in the chat box if you have any. Can everyone hear me okay? I got a note that. You guys hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. Great, thank you, sorry. To the person who is having trouble hearing, maybe adjust your volume. Sorry, like I was saying, housekeeping, everyone's on mute. Feel free to ask questions in the chat box. We will get to them at the end of the session. We're gonna leave lots of time for questions because I know there's lots of different questions about the subject. And then we'll be recording the webinar as well too. So if you do have to duck out at any point, we'll record it and you can always check it out later. So a little bit about Potomac Riverkeeper Network. If you're not as familiar with our work, we are a network of 3 riverkeepers. A riverkeeper is kind of a, boots on the ground, eyes in the water type of person. We go out and monitor our waterways all the time through on boats, on land. We go through, our riverkeepers go on helicopters to take photos, essentially investigating our waterways to make sure that they're safe and clean for our entire community. They're kind of our advocates and our investigators is what we like to call them. We use assessment, advocacy, and enforcement in our work. The enforcement part is what we're going to be talking about a lot in this webinar. It's how we utilize the Clean Water Act, which we'll be getting into. And other parts of our other work, we do other programs. So we do community science, water quality monitoring. We do some trash pickups. Like I said, if you're interested in our other work, check out our website or look at some of the past Water Wednesdays. Before we get started, I will introduce our 2 lovely speakers. So Phillip Musegaas is our Vice President of Programs and Litigation. He's been working with us for quite a while. He's a lawyer. He's been working on Clean Water Act stuff for quite a long time. Before this, he was at Hudson Riverkeeper. So he really knows the stuff, I'll tell you. And then Nancy Stoner is our president. And she has actually worked at the EPA before this, so she really knows a lot about the Clean Water Act. So if you have EPA specific questions, she worked in the Office of Water for a while. She's your go-to person. So Nancy, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much. And thanks everybody for joining us for this Water Wednesday series today. Emily Silence has put together just a great series of presentations for our members about the work we do. And so it's my pleasure to be on this today with Phillip Musegaas to talk about the Clean Water Act. This is the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act this year. So we are commemorating the Clean Water Act this year. And that's what we'll be talking about, is about the history of it and how we use it and what we're looking to in the future. The photo here is of Great Falls. This is from Roy Sewell, who was one of our board members. I say right at the beginning that this is the Clean Water Act from the standpoint of the Potomac River. So some people think it's about the Cuyahoga and other rivers. We think it's about the Potomac. So if you can visualize one of those maps people have about New Yorkers and how they see the world, and it's mostly Manhattan, that's sort of the way we are on the Potomac River. So the Potomac and the Shenandoah, the Upper Potomac, we're going to talk mostly about those and how they've factored into the passage of the Clean Water Act. I want to thank Casey Dutro also from Shenandoah University, who made this presentation for Phillip and for me. So Emily talked a little bit about the 3 riverkeepers. The thing about riverkeepers is that they protect a particular area, particular watershed. You'll see a picture of the watershed there on the right. It starts up in the mountains of West Virginia and the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. It goes all the way down to the Chesapeake Bay. We protect the whole thing except the Anacostia, which has its own riverkeeper, which predates our existence. You can see some of the characteristics of it. It's a beautiful, beautiful watershed. And we have lots of activities so you can get out and enjoy it with us. It's also, of course, the drinking water source for about 6 million people. The map on the left, I have in here because you'll notice that the US Capitol is in our watershed. So the Clean Water Act was passed in the Potomac watershed. So these are just some beautiful pictures of the watershed and the rivers that we have the good fortune to protect. That's the Upper Potomac, protected by your Upper Potomac Riverkeeper, Brett Walls. The Shenandoah, protected by your Shenandoah Riverkeeper, Mark Frondorf. And then the Potomac, and this is another photo of Great Falls, protected by your Potomac Riverkeeper, Dean Nyox. So starting at the beginning, so in the pre-colonial times, of course, the Potomac River was clean. It was a swimmable, fishable river. That's exactly what we're trying to get back to, is how it was before we polluted it. By the 1880s, there were lots of people in the region and lots of pollution. And they just started to deal with it at that time by building sewers. The sewers at that time did not lead to a treatment plant, but rather to the river, dump all the sewage, dump all the pollution in the river. And then by 1938, we had built Blue Plains, which is still the sewage treatment plant here in Washington, DC. Now it's an advanced treatment plant. At that time, it was primary treatment only. So more people, more pollution, very little treatment. And by 1965, President Johnson described the Potomac River as being a river of decaying sewage and rotten algae. And he wasn't the only one who referred to it. The chief sponsor of the Clean Water Act, Senator Muskie, referred to the Potomac River as being a hazard to health. So it was not in good shape at that time. Most of the pictures from that time look like this: very muddy water, very dirty, very polluted water, not safe for anyone to go into. But in addition to saying what a mess it was, President Johnson also expressed his hope that the Potomac would become a model of scenic and recreational values for the entire country. And that's really the vision that we at the Potomac Riverkeeper Network work to make a reality. Okay, so these next 7 years passed very quickly on the slides, but there actually was a lot of back and forth and deliberation for a couple of years about the Clean Water Act before it was finally passed. You may recall that President Nixon vetoed it, and he did so because he said it was too expensive. Well, fortunately for us, there were a lot of people who disagreed with him, including members of his own party, who said, no, this is a good expenditure for us. Bill Ruckelshaus at EPA also told him we absolutely needed to do this to protect future economic value in this country. And the Congress, in a very strongly bipartisan vote, overrode his veto and passed the Clean Water Act. The date is October 18, 1972. And so it will be 50 years this fall, and we look forward to commemorating that date. So what does the Clean Water Act do? So it set up a system of national goals, standards for protection of rivers, lakes, and coastal waters. The goals: fishable, swimmable, and sometimes people put in drinkable. Sometimes people refer that to the Safe Drinking Water Act. But the idea is that the source water would be safe to drink, the fish would be safe to eat, and it would be safe for people to swim in the water. And the system applied from the headwaters all the way down to the coastal waters. There has been a lot of debate over the years over what waters were intended to be protected, but the science is very clear, and Congress was aware of that. They were certainly aware of the fact that the headwaters led to the coastal waters, and to protect the water efficiently or completely, all of them had to be protected. You can't protect the big waters if you don't protect the little ones that flow into it. We won't talk in a lot of detail about the programs here, other than the citizen supervision, which is what we're going to talk about mostly as it relates to the Potomac Riverkeeper Network. the strength of the Clean Water Act is that it gives the people the power to clean up polluted waters. People who are impacted by pollution can bring as what's called a citizen suit themselves to stop the pollution that affects them. So of course the government also has powers, principally the EPA, but if the government fails to act, we as users of the waterways and our members who are users of the waterways, we can sue to protect ourselves and to stop the pollution. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Phillip, who's going to talk about how advocates like the Potomac Riverkeeper Network use the Clean Water Act to clean up the Potomac River. This photo is of Morgantown, which is a big power plant that's at right at the 301 bridge, which has been one of the sources of pollution that we have worked to address. On to Phillip.
All right, thank you very much, Nancy, and thanks everyone who's here. Thanks for joining us today. I'm gonna, as Nancy said, talk about some of the kind of interesting cases that we've successfully brought under the Clean Water Act. Talk about what some of the things were, how we do our work, how the legal work fits into that. Before I start in on the details, I do want to take another minute or so and just talk about what Nancy just teed up, which is this citizen suit provision of the Clean Water Act. And I think it's really important to understand kind of how interesting and how powerful this is and how useful this is a tool for us and for other clean water advocates. So the US is unique in many ways. Many countries and many states have their own environmental laws, but the Clean Water Act and several other federal statutes are incredibly powerful because they explicitly give citizens, and by citizens I mean us as an organization, a nonprofit organization, or individuals, the power to actually go into federal court and bring polluters into federal court. And that is the value of that really can't be overstated. I mean, I can tell you that as I've been a waterkeeper organization attorney for a long time. Our work, it depends very, very heavily on this ability to hold polluters accountable legally. It's not the only tool we have, and you'll hear me talk a little bit about some other tools, but it's a very powerful tool, and it really, what sets riverkeepers apart, what sets Potomac Riverkeeper Network apart in this region is our ability and our experience and our willingness to use the law, to use the Clean Water Act citizen suit to hold polluters accountable, essentially, to bring polluters into court. And that means private companies, municipalities, the federal government in some instances. And so it's really enabled us to make a lot of progress in our watershed, Potomac and the Shenandoah, that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to do, honestly. So just wanted to highlight that. I'm going to go through some cases pretty quickly. If anyone has questions, please put them in the chat about specific things I mentioned, and I'm happy to talk in more detail about any cases we have here. So interesting thing here in this region in the 1970s, I think it was 1971 actually, due to this very bad sewage pollution and the outdated sewer system that DC had, the government in DC actually banned or prohibited swimming in the Potomac and Rock Creek and the Anacostia back in 1971, specifically due to sewage pollution. So this is one of the only places in the country they've done that. We are hoping to see that ban lifted in the next 10 years, certainly, hopefully sooner than that. But that was the condition of the water was so bad that they really wanted to prevent a public health concern or public health crisis by keeping people out. And so just moving on from that, and as Nancy mentioned, Blue Plains is now, I think, the largest wastewater treatment plant in the world. For you wastewater treatment plant trivia buffs, if you ever get that question at bar trivia night, you'll know the answer. And just going on, in the 1980s and 90s, before we were formed in the early 2000s. There's a lot of Supreme Court and a lot of federal court litigation about what the Clean Water Act meant. And so some longstanding kind of national environmental groups Natural Resources Defense Council, Friends of the Earth, other groups, brought lots of challenges and brought lots of cases pushing for the Clean Water Act to be clearly defined and to see that authority really used. The Gwaltney case that's mentioned here is interesting just in terms of the citizen suit provision I've mentioned already and Nancy mentioned. There's a big distinction between what we can bring a lawsuit about and what the government can. So when we do a pollution investigation and we find a polluter, we find permit violations, those violations have to be continuing. They can't be in the past, which may seem odd at first glance. Well, you can cause a lot of pollution damage for a long time, and then if you stop, why aren't you accountable? You are still accountable to the governments, and to federal and state governments can still bring enforcement actions. But for us as a public, it has to be an ongoing concern that essentially the government is not doing anything about, that we can come and step in and take action. And then the last photo here in the bottom in 2000, again, before we were formed, a huge issue in this area, as we talked about, was the sewage pollution in DC. And so Anacostia Watershed Society, Friends of the Earth, and a couple other groups brought a major lawsuit to basically enforce the Clean Water Act regarding sewage discharges from the combined sewer system in DC, the outdated sewer system that we're talking about. And that lawsuit led to a federal consent decree, a kind of a settlement agreement that required the city of DC to come up with a plan to address that sewage. And so, believe it or not, we are still working through that plan today. The current goal is to have that, what's called the Clean Rivers Project. For you all that live in DC, that'll sound familiar to you. The Clean Rivers Project is going to be finished, if it continues on time, and it has been on time, it'll be finished by 2030. And at that time, the amount of sewage that gets discharged into the Potomac and Anacostia will be reduced by about 96%. So virtually eliminated, except for some very, very heavy rainstorm days where you might still have some overflows. But that case is that litigation is really leading to this huge Clean Rivers Project, and it's going to lead to incredibly clean waters. I mean, we've already seen the Anacostia have much better water quality and reduced sewage, and we're going to see that in the Potomac as well. So next slide, please. Thanks, Nancy. I'm just going to run through these quickly. The gentleman at the top there is Ed Merrifield. He is our founder. So we were founded in 2003 is when we were kind of formed. Ed quickly developed a really good model where we worked with pro bono lawyers in the region to bring our lawsuits for us. And so as we work today, I'm basically our in-house counsel. So we have a whole roster of amazing attorneys that do free legal work for us. They represent us in court for free. And just to give you a sense how much that is, how much that's worth, we have we receive about $1.5 to $2 million a year in pro bono legal services from a range of law firms, from larger environmental organizations that do litigation. So, our success is really contingent also on this fantastic partnership we have with outside lawyers. Also, just a couple notes here. We started to work in addition to traditional pollution like sewage coming out of the end of a pipe or industrial chemicals. We also started to see the impacts of chemical use and fertilizers and pesticides on the ecology of the river. And so what you see mentioned here in 2006, we started to see a lot of problems with fish die-offs, with what are called intersex fish, which have sex organs of both male and female in the same fish, which is a big red flag. Obviously, that's a concern about how chemicals and toxins are affecting the fish populations. So we started to work on that. We continue to work on that issue today. So not just traditional end of pipe kind of sewage, but a whole range of pollution issues that we are trying to tackle. We can go to the next slide, I think. We'll keep moving. Thanks, Nancy. And then just to, what we are also doing here is to try and give you a sense of the range of cases that we bring. Honestly, again, it's not just sewage, it's not just toxic industrial waste. We've tried to tackle every source of pollution that we find, and we can build a good case in our watershed. And so in 2015, after a couple of years of litigation and a lot of discussions, we had a big settlement agreement with Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, WSSC, for those of you like myself who live in Maryland. They provide our drinking water. They run the sewer system. WSSC had been, they have a drinking water treatment plant in Potomac, Maryland, where they take in water from the Potomac, treat it, and then that's our drinking water. The Potomac supplies drinking water for over 6 million people in this region. And unfortunately, they were operating an outdated treatment plant, and they were basically flushing huge amounts of solids. The things that they were filtering out of the water were kind of being flushed back into the river when they were cleaning out their treatment plant. And that resulted in, as you can see here, millions of pounds of aluminum and other metals and pollution going back in the river. And so our settlement required them to upgrade that plant. They've been in compliance ever since. And that's making a big difference on water quality. And what you see here is the actual, this is the discharge into the Potomac of their their kind of treated wastewater that after they treat it for drinking water, this is their permitted discharge. In 2016, again, kind of going back to bacteria, we've had the Clean Rivers Project now. It's undergone a few iterations in DC. In addition to that, the EPA is required under the Clean Water Act, because the bacteria levels have been so high, they're required to come up with a plan to treat that overall source of pollution. So in this case, they have to come up with a plan to reduce bacteria levels in the Potomac and Anacostia in Rock Creek. And the way those plans are done is pretty specifically laid out in the Clean Water Act. And over the course of many, many years now, over 10 years, we have repeatedly taken EPA to court and challenged EPA's plans for reducing bacteria because they've simply been inadequate. And so that we've had success with that. We have been in discussions now, and we're hoping to see even more protective bacteria standards in DC in the future that will kind of coincide and will complement the Clean Rivers Project. So lots of activity there to look forward to, honestly. 2017, that's a photo from an aerial patrol down at the bottom of the slide. We have done a lot of cases against power plants. Power plants are a large source of pollution when they're not operated properly, and coal-fired power plants, because of all the managing of coal waste and coal ash at the plants, tend to be big polluters, unfortunately, in our watershed. And so we've had a lot of investigations, activity, a lot of enforcement reports. We threatened to sue the Morgantown plant. Over the past couple of years, they actually decided to close that plant, and that Morgantown coal plant will be closing in June of this year. The Dickerson plant already closed. So the pressure that we put on these coal plants that are polluting is a big factor in them closing down. And that's not, it's not to say we're happy that people are losing their jobs. Obviously, people that work at these plants. We're also supporting legislation for job retraining, to clean up these sites, to make sure that this coal waste and the coal ash legacy is not left in place. Next slide, please. Thanks. A few more cases. Thank you all. 2018, this is a particularly horrifying picture that we took on the Potomac. Just like DC, the city of Alexandria, Virginia has had a huge problem with sewage pollution, and not at the same volume, but just to give you a sense, Alexandria was dumping about 140 million gallons of untreated sewage into the river every year. And what you see here is actually a photograph of that discharge. After a very, very rainy couple of days, our riverkeeper was out on the river and saw just this huge plume of sewage and garbage and everything else flowing out. And so these are, the sewage pollution is a huge issue. It obviously affects the health of the river. It's a public health concern. And with Alexandria, our original intention to sue the city for this pollution actually morphed and evolved into a legislative campaign similar to our coal ash work, which I'm going to mention, where we ended up deciding not to bring a lawsuit, but to work through the state legislature. And we were very successful in that regard. We actually got a state law passed that requires Alexandria to completely update its sewer system and basically eliminate these discharges by 2025. So sometimes the threat of litigation or bringing litigation is a powerful tool that you can use to move towards a different kind of solution, a legislative or a policy solution. We did the same thing with coal ash, as you see in the middle there. A long campaign, about a 4.5-year campaign that began with a Clean Water Act citizen suit. And then that we realized early on that the pollution problems that we addressed in our suit were quickly addressed by Dominion, but the larger issue of coal ash pollution was not being addressed. And so we took the legislative track there, and we succeeded in having that fully addressed as well. On a related note, one thing that's very helpful to our pollution enforcement work and our legal work is good data, right? We all need good data to Nancy, the other way, Nancy. We need good data to support our cases, to share information with the public about the health of the river. It's valuable in many, many ways. And so back in 2019, with some funding originally from the DC government, and then now we have funding throughout our watershed, we started citizen water quality monitoring. So what that means essentially is we train volunteers to go out and collect water samples at, I think now we have 28 locations up and down the Potomac River. We have 7 in DC, and then up and downriver and upriver of DC. And those samples are brought to a lab, which we have on our flagship vessel, the Sea Dog. We have a lab to analyze water samples. We test the samples for bacteria levels, and then we publicize that every Friday on our Swim Guide app, which is a free app anyone can download. And we basically tell people, were the bacteria levels at low enough levels where it's safe to recreate in the water or not. And so it's basically like a thumbs up or thumbs down system. And so the goal of that is to get the public engaged, let the public know when and where it's safe to swim in terms of bacteria levels, and also to track progress that we're making. Are we making a dent in bacteria pollution? Next slide. And a few more, again, just giving you a sense of the kind of the breadth and the scope of the legal work that we do. 2019, as you see at the top there, our Upper Potomac Riverkeeper, we responded to a tip from a fishing guide who actually fishes on the Upper Potomac, who saw a black liquid oozing out of the side of the riverbank into the Potomac. I kid you not. And so Brent investigated. Brent is our drone expert, so he used a drone and cameras and took water samples, and we found out that a very large old paper mill that's located on the Upper Potomac was actually was leaking this toxic black liquor substance that's a byproduct of paper production. They had a tank on their site that had leaked over the course of many years, leaked into the groundwater, polluted the site, and this stuff was oozing through the rocks right into the river. And so we brought a lawsuit, had a very good settlement with the state of Maryland and the paper mill owner, and they are remediating that pollution now, and the mill is closed now. And so they will have to come up with a comprehensive plan to kind of clean up that whole site. Similarly, during that same investigation, we found a coal storage site that was basically just piling up unused coal right next to the river. So every time it rained, all the ash and the kind of pollution from the coal pile would wash into the river. We successfully brought a case to end that. They actually closed down that site, moved the coal away from the river, and so got a very good and quick response there. 2021 at the bottom of the screen here. This is a good example, as I'm going to talk about in a minute, of kind of pollution issues that we have in our watershed that are honestly that are not as easy to solve with a straight ahead Clean Water Act lawsuit. The Shenandoah has been plagued for many years with nutrient pollution, nitrogen and phosphorus, that basically typically gets into the water column from runoff. So you have, as many of you know, the Shenandoah is a very heavily used area for agriculture. That's a big part of Virginia's economy and the valley's economy. And so there's a lot of very intensive raising of chickens, lots of cattle herds that use the river water. And so chicken manure, when it is used for fertilizer on farm fields, if it runs off during a rainstorm or if too much fertilizer is applied, that runs off into the river, and too many nutrients in the water lead to this. The picture you see of this huge algae bloom, and algae blooms can be a nuisance. They can, as you can see in that picture, you're not going to want to go canoeing in that. You're not going to want to go fishing, and you're certainly not going to want to go swimming in that water. In addition, if it turns into a harmful algal bloom, or if there's a toxic algae or chemicals or toxins that are formed sometimes in algae blooms, that can actually be a real public health threat. You can have a toxic algae, if it's ingested by your dog or by a pet or by cattle, can kill them. And so public health concerns, river access and recreation concerns with this, and our advocacy over the last 10 years has led to new standards being put out by the state of Virginia to basically finally measure how much algae is getting in the river, and ideally to develop a program to reduce that pollution in the first place. And so a long road on that, 10 plus years, but we're finally seeing some progress, at least on paper. We're going to have a standard that we can use, and we can enforce that standard to try and push for better solutions to this agricultural pollution problem. Next slide. All right, so that was a very quick rundown of some landmark cases that we've had. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just kind of stepping back out, giving you some big picture thoughts about the act, and then Nancy's going to jump back in for a minute, and we want to make sure we leave time for conversation. I see a lot of questions going in the chat. So one thing I want to talk about, which with this slide basically tells you about, is, Nancy talked about what the Clean Water Act does, how valuable it is. We want to make sure you understand what it doesn't do and what it doesn't protect. And as I mentioned with the Shenandoah algae issue, agricultural pollution, or what we call non-point source pollution, or basically, runoff from farm fields, farmers' use of chemicals and pesticides and things like that, the management of manure and waste from farms. Hog waste is a huge issue in the South in terms of intensive animal agriculture. The Clean Water Act doesn't do a great job on that. It has some requirements for very, very large livestock operations, but in essence, it doesn't really address that. And so we have to find other ways to work on overuse of manure, on nutrient pollution. The big regional plan that we have to clean up Chesapeake Bay, in large part, is focused on addressing this kind of pollution, because that's the primary cause of the decline in the bay's health, was from this type of nutrients and sediment and things coming off of agricultural operations. It also doesn't protect groundwater. For you, any legal wonks that are on the call and interested in this, it really protects surface waters, so rivers, streams, lakes, wetlands, things like that. Stormwater is a big issue, an ongoing pollution issue. I think it's one of the biggest challenges we have remaining. And then climate change and environmental justice. EPA is working a lot through policies and through kind of non-legal means, but the Clean Water Act itself doesn't really address those issues, and we've had to be very creative to find ways to address those. Next slide. All right, and I think this slide, I'll go quickly. Emily addressed this a little bit at the beginning. We kind of take a advocacy, assessment and enforcement approach. we do a lot of factual research. We do on the ground water sampling investigations to figure out, how big of an issue a pollution issue is, what levers can we use to address it, whether it's a lawsuit or a legislative change or grassroots campaign, and then we pursue that. Legal campaigns and legal work is one of the most powerful tools we have, but it's certainly not the only tool in our toolbox. And our goal, of course, is not to punish polluters for the pollution. That's more the federal government's job. Our goal, whenever we bring a lawsuit, is to stop the pollution, and if necessary, which it often is to restore the damage that was done to the environment. Whether that's a stream restoration, cleaning up an industrial site. We have a fantastic campaign to put freshwater mussels back in the Potomac. Mussels are natural filter feeders. They can clean the water without us doing anything. We just have to give them a chance to thrive and to find places to live. Next slide. All right, and I think I'll end. I think I'm ending on this one. What else can we do? We're going to talk a lot, I think, in the Q&A about this. Coal plants are a huge source of pollution. We're seeing a lot of the coal plants in our watershed shut down from a variety of pressures. And environmental justice is an area that we need to do a lot more work on. We need to, I think, focus a lot more of our resources on working with communities that are carrying an unfair burden, carrying an unfair, disproportionate burden of pollution in their community specifically, and find them ways to address that. All right, Nancy, I will let you wrap up. Thank you so much.
Okay, very good, very good. So then this is what we're looking for toward the future. So again, we're one of our lead campaigns, the Swimmable Potomac campaign, is looking to lift the ban on swimming in waters in DC and to have swimming opportunities available to everyone. And the photo is from Shark Fest, which is actually a swimming event in National Harbor for which we get a permit. But we would like to have more swimming opportunities for everyone in DC. So cleaning up the water and lifting the swim ban are two things that we need to do. Phillip already talked about Alexandria and DC. Alexandria is supposed to be done with that cleanup plan by 2025 and DC by 2030. And then, of course, our goal is to have the Potomac River meet the goals of the Clean Water Act, have it be teeming with fish, safe for swimming, and provide great drinking water to the millions who live here. So we're not done yet. So we're commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act, looking back at all the progress we've made, all the great recreational opportunities that we've been a part of creating that we're very proud of. As you'll see the slides, there's lots of people out on the water, enjoying the water, becoming enamored with the water and becoming stewards of the water. And that's what we'd like everyone to do. These pictures are, of course, from last year, but we've got a bunch of events coming up this year as well for us to enjoy the beautiful waterways that we work to protect. So we're commemorating the act, we're celebrating progress, we're engaging the public, we're envisioning an even cleaner river for the future. And then we, of course, want to swim in the Potomac. You can pretty much swim in the Shenandoah now, but in the Potomac, a little bit less so. And some people have been asking about safety issues. We're not trying to get people to swim in Great Falls. We're trying to get people to swim in controlled areas that are safe areas. And we're looking to others to identify the safety issues in addition to water quality, which is the one that we are working on directly. So here's some of the events you can put on your calendar. Yesterday was World Water Day. We had a fantastic kickoff at the wharf. We've got Earth Day river cleanups on the 23rd in Oxen Cove, and then that whole week, Earth Week up in the Shenandoah. We'll be launching the Swimmable Potomac campaign on May 25th. We've got fantastic events. Again, I mentioned Shark Fest, which is one you could get involved in directly. We're going to have a rally for clean water on the 24th. Rio Palooza, our event in the Shenandoah, focused on Spanish-speaking river enthusiasts. World Rivers Day on September 25th, and our gala on the October 8th, 10 days before the actual anniversary. So please check out the details on our website. You can get involved, come to these. You can also sponsor the 50th anniversary. You can also get involved in peer-to-peer fundraising. And with that, we'll turn it over to questions.
Great, thank you. Yeah, before we get into questions, I just want to echo what Nancy said about peer-to-peer fundraising, because it's your great, awesome way to get involved this year. I think it's going to be really big. We've got prizes for the top winners. The top winner gets a kayak, which is pretty cool. And there's t-shirts and stuff like that too. So if you're interested in seeing the river return to a swimmable state, help us get there. So the first question, the first question came from the registration form, which, get ready, Philip, it's a Waters of the U.S. Question.
Wait, that's for Nancy, I think. Okay, no.
Sorry, for Nancy, okay. In the last 50 years, the Clean Water Act sometimes applies to intermittent wetlands and vernal pools, and sometimes not, depending on how environmental the president is. How can we ask Biden and Harris to ask the EPA to interpret the Clean Water Act this way?
All right, Nancy, do you want to
Sure,
take the
I'm
first
happy to
crack and then
talk
I'll
about
follow
it.
up? Okay,
Yeah. So the Biden administration is, and the EPA there is already working on a rule to replace the Trump rule, which narrowed the scope of the Clean Water Act in a way that really does not effectively protect waters across the country. So we'll see what they do. They're working on putting out a proposal next fall, and what they're going to start with is pretty much going back to what used to be in place in the 1980s. So there'll be some issues with lack of clarity, but it will at least restore the scope that we had before, which was more protective of the nation's waters.
That's exactly right. So I think there will be very good opportunities for the public to get involved. I think as you said, Nancy, I think in the fall, when this new proposal comes out, EPA, I assume hopefully by that time they will have in-person public meetings, but certainly they'll have virtual hearings, opportunities to testify, to put in written comments, and it's really valuable when they hear from the public. They always hear from groups like ours. It doesn't mean our comments, our detailed legal comments that we send in are very powerful and useful, but it makes a big impression when they hear from people who express their support and appreciation for clean water, whether that's fishing or swimming or aesthetic reasons, or just that they want a clean environment. And I think one thing I want to quickly mention that I didn't at the beginning. The other reason the Clean Water Act and our ability to bring legal action, the other reason that's so valuable is that the waterways that we're talking about are in the public trust. They belong to us. They don't belong to the power companies that use them to dump their pollution, or to the Blue Plains or DC Water, where all our sewage goes. They belong to us, and we as a society, and our government is supposed to protect and steward those resources, our water resources, and to keep them in the public trust. So they're not only valuable for us and useful for us now, they should be clean enough and safe enough and healthy enough for future generations to use. So I think that's something valuable to keep in mind.
All right, awesome. So the next question, has the swimming ban been lifted yet? Which, short answer, no. But could you guys maybe talk about the petition and what maybe a potential timeline could look like?
Sure, I'll jump in. Nancy, please add anything I miss. So the swimming ban is still in place. We have had a lot of discussions with DC government, with the Department of Energy and Environment, which is the DC environmental regulator, the environmental agency in DC. Essentially, I think one thing to remember now is that the swimming ban is not enforced. It's rarely enforced, if at all. And again, as Nancy mentioned, we're not encouraging people to swim in dangerous parts of the Potomac. The river, certainly upriver of DC, there are areas which you should not swim in, below Great Falls, obviously around Great Falls, Mather Gorge. There's areas where the currents are very strong, where it's not recommended. But, we see in the safer areas around the Georgetown waterfront and downriver from there, the boat rental companies, the places where you can rent a paddleboard or a kayak or a canoe. Those are hugely popular in the summertime, and so people are out paddling and paddleboarding. I'm a paddleboarder, and I know, I've gone swimming in the Potomac off my paddleboard many times because it's a hot summer day and it's beautiful and the water is clean. And so that type of activity is not prohibited, but we still want to see the ban lifted. The fact that we have a ban in place because of historic pollution, just for many reasons, we should move on from that. We should not have that on the books anymore. And so our goal really, we have a petition up, I think through our website now. We'll try, and one of us can put the link in the chat that you can sign. It's to Mayor Bowser and the DC government. Not asking them yet for a specific date, but simply saying we'd like to see a resolution and a public commitment by the DC government to lift the ban by no later than 2030, when the Clean Rivers project is finished, when our rivers will be much cleaner, even after heavy rains. That's the latest I think we want to see that ban left in place. So it's kind of a work in progress, but we are, our goal is to see that ban lifted, and then not only lifting the ban, but putting in place a system where the government, when there is unfortunately sewage discharges, where they can notify the public in a simple way that there might be bacteria in the water and that they should stay out of the water, which many cities do now. New York City, Philadelphia, Chicago, they all have systems where they can notify the public when they might have sewage discharges, and people can make informed decisions, which is what we're aiming for.
Great, awesome. So next question, how can we bring SWEET a future event such as some of the land use changes allowed or mandated by the Farm Bill, BEP or BARC is current example?
Well, it's hard to, I'm not sure I know what those acronyms are, to be honest, Nancy. I don't know if you do, but in terms of kind of future land use actions, the Clean Water Act, the citizen suit process that we've talked about today really wouldn't be able to address that. The way that Clean Water Act suit process works, if there is a violation of the Clean Water Act that's ongoing, we can bring a lawsuit against a specific entity. So whether it's a power plant company or a municipality who's has a landfill operation or something like that, a specific site or a facility or group of facilities that are either violating their permit terms for their discharge or discharging pollution, dumping pollution without a permit. That's traditionally where that lawsuit ability comes in handy. So Nancy, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so I'll add a little bit to that. So in general, the Clean Water Act is not a land use statute. So there are some exceptions to that. If you're filling in a federally protected wetland, that can be the subject of an enforcement action. There also are requirements for dealing with construction site runoff that are applied under the stormwater program. But in general, it's not about land use. There are other federal statutes about that, not the Clean Water Act. And I actually think that was probably an essential element of having it pass, is not having it be a land use statute and actually focused on the waters and the waterways, as Phillip said, the public trust waterways, and focusing the protection on those.
All right, thanks, Nancy. Yeah, many land use decisions are often left to local government through zoning and other means. So thanks.
Next question, is the bacteria level publication on Fridays on PRK Network, PRKN site?
So Emily, you might help me answer this everywhere this shows up, but we use this swim guide app. And again, I think we can get that in the chat in a minute before we finish. There's a swim guide is the name of a website and an app you can download onto your phone. We typically post the results of our sampling on that app. And when you go to that app or the website, it basically shows you a map, gives you the locations of where we do the sampling, and then it tells you what the water quality conditions are from our last sampling episode. So yeah, I'm sure that there's a link to that from our website. We also, is there, okay, thanks. And we also, I know on our social media, I believe every Friday or Saturday, we also publicize our results and link to our results on social media. So there are plenty of ways you can get that. And I encourage you to get the app. It's actually a really interesting app. And the Swim Guide app, you can use it wherever you go. I mean, if you take a vacation to Florida and you want to know what the water quality is like there, you can, the app will automatically kind of go to where you are on the map and you can find out the conditions there. So
the only thing I would add to that
thanks,
is
Emily.
that it is a community science water quality monitoring program, which means that we primarily rely on volunteers. We have a volunteer who coordinates that program, but we also have volunteers who collect the samples and do the analysis for us. And we are looking for additional volunteers to help us this summer. It's very easy to get trained online and then to help be a part of it and to help monitor the waterways that you love.
We're not sampling right now, by the way. Our sampling period is April through September, right?
Yeah.
May.
So
May through September. Yeah,
May
thank you,
September.
Emily, for.
So there won't be any. You can look at last year's results, but we just mostly sample during the recreational season, since obviously people aren't swimming in January. Okay, next question from Mark. Phillip, Nancy, so you guys touched on this a little bit, but can you talk about one of the major shortcomings of the Clean Water Act, in that it does not address our most significant remaining source of pollution problem, non-point solution or non-point sources? But you also maybe say what a non-point source is versus point source for the folks who may not know.
Sure. Nancy, you want me to?
Go ahead. Sure.
Okay. So this is one of those kind of weird lingo terms that we use. So when we say point source, which is, the majority of the way the Clean Water Act is set up is focused on point sources of pollution. A point source, the easiest way to think of that is that is what you would traditionally think of as a pipe that's discharging kind of liquid waste into a waterway, right? That's the best example of that. I think we had a couple of photos of those in our slideshow today. And so nowadays that's typically treated wastewater, either from a sewage treatment plant or like we saw today, a drinking water treatment plant. So the kind of the wastewater that they have as a byproduct of their operations, they've treated it. They treat it so they get the pollution down to a level that's minimal or safe, and they eliminate certain types of pollution. They have a permit that regulates what they can discharge. So that's a typical point source. Storm sewers, stormwater outfall discharges, those are point sources. And those are all well regulated under the Act. Non-point sources are things like the Shenandoah agricultural issue that I was talking about. So when you have a farm field next to the river where the farmer is applying a lot of manure as a fertilizer, and let's say they're applying it, or they need to get rid of their chicken manure, so they're applying it during the wintertime, even when there's not crops growing, and they apply it on their fields, and there's a big rainstorm, and a lot of that manure and the bacteria that's in it is washed into the river off of the field. That's a non-point source type pollution. So it's not all going down into a pipe. It's just kind of running off into the river. That's a concern. That's a challenge to deal with because it's not as well regulated under the Act. And so I think I'll stop there for now, but happy to answer more questions on that.
Yeah, there's kind of a follow-up to it. So can PRKN use other laws and regulations to fight agricultural pollution, since the Clean Water Act doesn't cover non-point source pollution?
Mm-hmm. I can give you a Virginia example. So Virginia is interesting in that they have a state law called the Agricultural Stewardship Act, which in this case, which gives the public the ability, the power to file complaints against particular landowners, not always farmers, but particular landowners for violations of that act that result in pollution to our waterways. And so basically eroding and trampling, destroying the vegetation along the stream bank, that would not really be allowed under the Ag Stewardship Act. So a complaint can be filed with the state. State inspectors have to come out and determine whether the complaint is a valid one, and then they have to work with the farmer or the landowner to address that pollution. So that's at the state level, that's a very and Alan Lehman, who works with him, they use that quite a bit to try and get farmers to adopt better practices. Beyond that, there are other ways you can potentially address some non-point source pollution. There are nuisance laws, there are other things, but it's often challenging to use other forms to address it. I think our typical approach is to look at legislation, to look at grassroots campaigns, or the combination of those things to try and affect change.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Phil. Okay, so are any local Indigenous communities involved in the work of Potomac Riverkeeper Network and these great campaigns? If so, what are their goals and hopes for the Potomac?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work very closely. We have a wonderful connection with the Piscataway tribe so they're downriver from DC. They're in Maryland, and they have ancestral lands there around Mattawoman Creek. We do part of our annual summer kind of organized paddling events. This is one way we kind of introduce people to the history of the Piscataway. We have people from the tribe join us to lead some guided paddles in Mattawoman, and they learn about Piscataway history. We're working with them on pollution issues in Mattawoman Creek and other areas, pollution from PFAS chemicals, from other things. So we do, when we can, we work very closely with local tribes for sure. Yeah.
All right, I think we got time for one last question. So what is the future of trash slash plastics management in the context of the Clean Water Act?
That's a great question. I don't know, Nancy, if you want to, I'm happy to take a first crack.
Well, I would mostly say that this is a good example of something where the Clean Water Act doesn't directly address it. So a lot of the trash, as you probably know, that in plastic that ends up in the waterways comes from the stormwater program. The 1987 amendments to the Clean Water Act did put in stormwater management programs. So municipal trash is addressed to some extent through that, but the trash problem is growing, and we are increasingly working at the state and local level to pass legislation to address the sources of pollution. We also have cleanups, so you can come out and help us to clean up, but the cleanups are not the ultimate solution. The ultimate solution is addressing the sources and reducing the amount of plastics generated, and that's going to probably be mostly at the state and local level. Within our watershed. I just want to say one last thing here as we're wrapping up, which is a couple of you have asked very specific questions about specific places. Feel free to follow up with Phillip or me directly. If you have questions that we didn't get to today, we're very happy to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
And there was just a question about events too. So I just want to address that. We have lots of events going on this year that are Clean Water Act related. The whole year is kind of a Clean Water Act celebration. So every event we're kind of going to be talking about the Clean Water Act, referencing it. The actual signing, the actual anniversary was in October. So our October events are going to be more specifically related to it. So our gala, and we have an end of year wrap up event at Port City that's going to be talking about the Clean Water Act. But check out on our website, we have a whole list of events. You can see what you're interested in. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, everyone. I hope you enjoyed talking about the Clean Water Act. Like I said, if you missed a portion of it, if you came in late, I'm going to send around a recording, and I will send around my contact info and Phillip and Nancy's as well, too, should you be interested in, following up on any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Bye-bye, everyone.